I had mentioned this morning that I was going to give you the sort of first steps to building a tool that would have some utility on the exam. And as much as it's not a memorization exam, one of the challenges that comes about is exactly what we saw with the Stephen and Nancy case. There's a reason that I actually put that case first. I like that case. I think it does a lot in terms of lessons learned around what the exam looks like and how to answer questions and some of those types of things. I'm a fan of working through that one first, just because it gives us lots of meat. Now, and it's not a difficult scenario. That's, I think, the nice thing about it is, corporations or trusts or anything like that. The most complicated thing is the separation issue. What I would like to look at here is our various thresholds then around income. And this ties into the CPP problem that we saw with that question. So recall that with the Canada Pension Plan, we have that YMPE, at least this year, at $57,400. What should happen when you are going through an exam question is whatever level of income you see that the client in that question is earning, you should be able to make a connection back to the benefits to which that person would be entitled, or to the financial planning concerns that they would have at that level of income. Does that make sense? Okay. And I'll just show you here the numbers we're going to look at. We got 10 to 50, 60 to 100, and 110 to 200. Okay. So just so that you can kind of see where I'm coming from here. What I would suggest you want to do, we're going to just start this thing. And what I would suggest you want to do then is print this off and work through on your own. And as you come across something in your study material or in your study time, just add it onto this list. Now, that being said, we can do a fair bit here. What would be some items? So let's say I have somebody who's making around $30,000 to $40,000 a year. Any thoughts about any thresholds or whatever that we hit in that $30,000 to $40,000 range? Okay, so we can talk about Canada Learning Bond. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a nice one to throw in here. So this is where the cutoff for Canada Learning Bond starts, right, Melissa? Depending on the number of kids you have, but yeah, that's a really good one. That's exactly the kind of thing. Okay. And you'll notice I'm not going to put an exact dollar amount. That's not what the question is going to have you do. The question is not going to have somebody who makes $31,000 and expect you to know whether or not that person is in that cutoff range or not, because they would be right on the cusp there. Rather, the question might have somebody making $25,000 or $26,000 who does qualify, or somebody making $45,000 or $50,000 who does not qualify. That's good? Okay, anything else at that 30,000-ish threshold? Is there anything else we should be thinking about here? Well, I got lots more. Okay, I'll throw a couple at you here. First off, that is the, well, potentially, Nicola, in a rare number of circumstances, you're a little high for GIS, but GIS is a good thing to think about on this page for sure, yeah. This is where we're going to have the first tier of reductions for the Canada Child Benefit. Okay, that starts at about $32,000 this year now. Okay, and then if we're looking at, yeah, it got to go a little higher for RDSP grants. In fact, quite a bit higher for our DSP grants. There is the bond, which does start to cut off here. Yeah, the bond, that's right, yeah. So our DSP bond starts to cut off, and that RDSP bond cutoff ends at the low 40s. Okay, Nicola's point of GIS. So somewhere in the high teens or low 20s, depending on the exact circumstance, that's where your guaranteed income supplement ends. If income exceeds, perfect. That's an exact $30,000 amount, Shelley, right? Yeah, couldn't get any more 30,000 than GST, right? So GST must be collected by most self-employed, not everybody, right? There are some exceptions to that if you're not selling GST-able services, but ODSP is quite a bit lower, Cameron. This is a good one to bring up, though. I'm glad you mentioned this. ODSP is going to cut off at, I've never done the upper end math, around 21 or 22,000, isn't it? Cameron, isn't that right for ODSP? Somewhere in this range. I'll throw it in here at about the low 20s. It could be with kids, you can get to 30,000. I know that it's larger with kids. I know for AISH, which is the Alberta equivalent, it's $32,400, but I know ODSP is a lot quicker cutoff because ODSP starts to cut off at $400 of income or $300 of income, right? Anyways, your provincial disability supports are clawed back somewhere at this range. Now, ODSP is a provincial disability support. Given what I said about this earlier, how much do I have to know about ODSP for this exam? Yeah, that's not income share, and that's assets. You're right. The ODSP asset test just changed from $5,000 to $40,000, but that's not any income test. Okay. Sorry, yeah, that GST one, Troy just mentioned that too. I'll get to that one in a moment. Yeah. So what do I have to know about provincial disability supports? Yeah, you don't have to know, Dean, the specifics of ODSP. That's true. But I should know in general, I should know just general principles here only. And all of these programs sort of have the same level or the same rules around starting age, ending age. So age 18 to 65, payable for somebody who can't earn income due to a serious disability. They all have serious income and asset tests where it's very hard to collect any money if you have any ability to earn income or any assets associated with that. Right, so just general rules, not specifics. Don't go spend a bunch of time studying ODSP, although if you're in Ontario, I think you should know ODSP a little bit anyways. Okay, if you're not in Ontario, don't worry about ODSP. But if you're in Alberta, know AISH. If you're in BC, you know BCEA. Or if you're in Manitoba, you know MAP or whatever. Okay. GST, yeah, sorry, that 30,000. We're still clustering all this stuff around 30,000, right? See how that's just that 30,000 level is so very busy. That's where your GST credit starts to reduce. again, based on your number of kids, much like the Canada Learning Benefit, actually, or the Canada Learning Bond, sorry. Anything else? Oh, I even still have another $30,000 one I can throw at you. In the mid-30s, this is where we're going to start to lose the age credit. Okay, that age credit, which is clawed back much the same way that OAS is clawed back, actually, a 15 cent on the dollar clawback. How much income do I have to earn before my GIS starts to claw back? It's kind of a trick question. No, sorry, GIS. Did I say OAS? I meant GIS. Let's do GIS. That's the most income that I can earn and collect it. The 17,000 is where my GIS will cut off altogether. In fact, and the reason I suggest this is kind of a trick question is that your GIS clawback starts at the first dollar of income, excluding any OAS and GIS benefits. But $1 of Canada Pension Plan or $1 of RIF income causes a reduction. Oh, actually, that does lead to another newly examinable item. I'm glad you mentioned this GIS thing. I talked about budget 2019 this morning. What's the GIS change that we saw with budget 2019? That might be why you're thinking of 15,000 actually, Melissa. No. You can earn up to $5,000 of T4, and not T4A, really T4 income, like from a job, or self-employment income with no GIS clawback. It used to be $3,500. And then the next 10,000 of that income only gets half the clawback. Okay, that's another budget 2019 item. All right. Any other questions there? Any other points that we should throw on here? Yeah, I actually would not be surprised, Cameron, to see a GIS question on the exam. There didn't used to be a next, Shelley. It used to be the first $3,500 had no clawback, and then after that, you just had clawback. Yeah. Okay. Only for your job, though, Melissa. Okay. Still, if it's CPP or RIF income or investment income, then it's on the first dollar. Okay. That's very specific to job. Yeah, there's a good one, Shelley. I can throw the basic personal exemption in just over $10,000, right? That is exactly the kind of thing that should be on this list. Yeah. For that matter, what about the first tax bracket? Where am I going to move from the first tax bracket into the second tax bracket? About 45,000, right on, Troy. That's where we're going to move to the 20.5% federal tax bracket. Do not memorize your tax brackets, but I should have a rough idea about what happens as my income increases. I should know when I see somebody making $60,000 that they're no longer in the lowest tax bracket, but when I see somebody at 40,000, they are still in that lowest tax bracket. So not a bad idea to have a pretty good handle on your tax brackets. And then the only other one I want to put on this list, there's a whole bunch more you can add. Honestly, there's at least another dozen items that very easily fit on this list. But the other one that I want to throw up here is EI. Your maximum income for EI sits at around $52,000. 52.4, if my memory serves me correctly this year. Okay, I would suggest then you print this off and just flesh it out as you go through your studies. Yeah, exactly, Brian. I'm going to put that on the next slide just because it fits a little neater there. I absolutely do want to put YMPE on here, as you rightly guessed, but I'm going to put on the next slide. Okay. So yeah, YMPE right here. And that's your maximum income for CPP purposes. Okay, what else should go here? Somebody already mentioned the OAS clawback. I apologize that I don't remember who it was, but whoever it was had it right. Anyways, Troy, that was you, wasn't it? And that's where OAS clawback starts. Anything else that would go on this page? What about the Canada Child Benefit? What's the Canada Child Benefit amount that I should be thinking about here? Actually, about 66,000 with Canada Child Benefit is the next tier. Of Canada Child Benefits. Okay. Anything else on this page? That's what we're going to see. This page is going to be quite a bit lighter than the previous page where all those low income benefits are all kind of piled together. What about tax brackets here? That's what I was looking for. Perfect. So that's about 95,000 today, right? That's where you're going to move to the 26% federal tax bracket. Okay. Anything else? There's a good one to throw up here, Shelley. Yeah. And we're going to hit that right around 90,000, sum total of the bottom two tax brackets from last year, right? That's where we're going to move to our 300% and 200% Canada Disability Savings Grants to the 100% CDSG. Yeah, exactly. Okay, that's good. And what about on this page? Now I have a lot more income with a lot more room. What should we be thinking about here? Couple tax brackets here, Joan, right? We're going to see we're going to move from the 26% to the 29% federal tax brackets. That's it, Shelley. Yeah, we'll come back to the OAS clawback right away. I'll just throw in the other tax bracket here as well, where we're going to move from 29% to 33% federal tax brackets. And so this is your maximum income for OAS clawback if OAS started at age 65. There's a kind of clever article floating around right now that rightly points out that if you wait until age 70 to start your OAS, you get a little bit more clawback room, although it's not a huge amount because it's 15% on your extra 36%. So it's not terrible, but well, still just changes the clawback, Brian, right? It's not really about timing on that one. It's really just about changing the clawback. Okay. Perfect. Again, print these 3 pages off, hang on to them. Yeah, oh, so that's a good one, Margaret. Absolutely. Absolutely a good point here. Right around 150, right? That's where we're going to hit max income for your RSP, DB, DC, IPP contribution room. That's it, Margaret, right? Now, if I was doing that 100% correctly, I would have 2 separate lines for that. I'd have the RSP just a little bit lower dollar amount than the DB, DC, IPP because those two are always a year ahead, but that's okay. All right. Any questions triggered out of any of those? I am at some point going to talk about the Canada Child Benefit. I believe that we should be talking about Canada Child Benefit a little bit more than we are. It could be time to start seeing this on the exam, although I'm not sure yet if that's going to happen, but it could be around the corner. It's now been around for 3 years. It's time to start seeing some exam questions on it. Yeah, I'm going to show that at the end of the day, Luciana, how to get the notes and all that kind of stuff. Okay. Perfect. All right, as a couple of you have pointed out, there is a whole bunch of stuff available for you to study from. You still have lots of time. Time is definitely on your side here before you get to the exam. And we can look at a whole bunch of different stuff that's out there, but the first thing we should think about is, why are you studying? Okay, which maybe sounds like a ridiculous question, but there has to be a reason to study. If you're studying with no reason, if you don't have a why, if I can borrow from Simon Sinek here, then your studying is not going to do anything. Well, that's it, Shelley, right? So yeah, what's the actual thing you're hoping to improve on by studying? Okay, so is this about some gaps in knowledge? Have you identified that there are things that you want to brush up your knowledge on? And you know that you should know those things. Okay, that's a good reason to study. If you're doing it that way, then you're probably going to have a very targeted type of study. You can't just open your textbook and start flipping through for things you don't know. Maybe it's in class here, you identified some things that you want to be more comfortable with, or maybe you attend some session somewhere, or a client asks you a question, whatever it is, and somewhere along the way, something comes up where you say, I want to have a little bit more knowledge about something. Good. That's a great reason. That's something that should never stop. But we want to think about also possibly reducing exam stress. It might be that in order for you to feel comfortable on the morning you sit down to write the exam, you have to be able to say, I studied as much as was realistically possible for me. It might be that you're not really sure, but it's something you feel you should be doing. If that's the case, I would suggest come back to maybe a better why. It's going to be really hard to get motivated this way. It might be to do practice questions, or it might be to practice exam technique. And those are closely related ideas, but not necessarily the same. And I'll show you that when we look at the Gobet material in a few minutes. So you have lots of resources available. There is more stuff than you could possibly get through between now and exam day. I have FPSC on here. I'm still trying to break the habit. FP Canada has lots of good stuff available. I already pointed you to the webinar recording. You can go back and watch their webinar about the exam. Again, I do recommend it. I think they did a really good job this year with this. So yeah, watch the webinar. Okay, the resources tab. When you're logged in within your portal, if you follow the link to the resources tab, there are some free questions here. Available to everybody. You don't have to pay anything for those. You just have to have an account with FP Canada. And the tutorial, which a couple of people have asked about already, that is also available within your portal. And then you have to log into a second site. Now, the one comment I have around this is the question here is a question that's also in the practice exam. If you're writing the practice exam on whatever I said, November 16th or 17th, and you want to have a sort of pure experience, don't do the tutorial. Just wait to do the tutorial after you've written the practice exam, because otherwise you'll have exposed one of the questions before that. That's also a reason why I won't do questions from the practice exam in class. And if you have a question about a question on the practice exam, you can ask the question. Just don't recreate the question in the forums on Moodle. We talked already quite a bit about the FP Canada practice exam. Okay, that's all the stuff that FP Canada has. On top of that, you may or may not want to use some of the stuff that is available for pay out there. Now, you already have a bunch of my stuff available. I don't have anything else, by the way, that I sell. There's not some second layer of stuff that I'm going to sell to you. Really, the deal we have with Sarah is that everything is just available. It's good. Super simple, right? Okay. Now, that being said, there are some, I don't know if they're my competitors or whatever, but other people who are in the private exam prep space. Did anybody buy the Gobet stuff? I actually don't know when we cut off access, Melissa. We're never in a rush to cut off access. Yeah, did you use it for level 1, Shelley? Yeah, I kind of agree with that critique, Cameron. I'm not sure what you mean by go to, Chris. Really, the reason I built it was just so people would have something to study. That's all. I found without that 90-day study schedule, Chris, people had no idea where to go. You do the practice exam before the tutorial, Sharon. Okay. The tutorial is just to see how the software works, but it includes a question from the practice exam. So if you go do the tutorial today, you kind of ruin one of the practice exam questions for yourself. Is that okay? Yeah, and I mention it here, Shelley, so that everybody knows. I don't, and I appreciate it. I think that you're well equipped to make comments about it. So here's what I'll say that's good about the GoBay package. It is a very inexpensive way to buy a ton of practice questions. They have 50 case studies. It's more than you're going to find anywhere else. If you were somebody who just wanted to sit down and write practice questions, perfect. However, I have two critiques I will make of it, and one of them came up earlier already. It is too technical. The questions here are more technical than what you'll see on the exam. It's not a matter of difficulty. That's not the problem. The problem is that almost every GoBay question hinges on some very technical detail of the Income Tax Act. Okay, is that a fair critique for those that have used that material? Okay, so that's where I'm always a little bit wary about this, but honestly, if you just want to practice, it is a cheap way to do it. At around $300, you get 50 case studies. Nobody sells that much content for that low a price. It's all self-study. You can really just practice question after question after question. And then the other thing I don't like about it is that access ends on exam day. For, I don't know, like they just cut it off on exam day. So if you fail, you have to buy the same package again, which I don't like. I try to make a more fair arrangement of that with our students. I don't find that that's good. All right, Foran. So anybody going to the four? That's true, Cameron. Yes. Which I understand. And I know David and John, the principals at GoBay, and I've talked to them about all of my critiques. This is not the first time that I've said these things, and I've talked to them about this personally. So yeah. Yeah, the Foran stuff. Are you going to go to the class too, Melissa? Did you just buy the package? Oh, interesting. How does it look? Right, and it's sort of just a review package, right? Like the whole course in bullet form. That's what Foran does, right? Yeah. But they also have an exam, a CFP exam package you can buy. That's what I was hoping you'd have, Melissa. Anyways, Foran, what they're best known for, they have a live class, a live 5 or kind of 6-day class. Okay. In Vancouver and Toronto in October, later in October and November. I believe they're selling it for $1,400 right now. It's a little bit pricey, but it's good. And what it is, it's really a sort of fire hose review of all the content. They get about 80 people in the room, at least in Toronto. It's smaller classes in Vancouver, but they get about 80 people in the room. Those people just kind of sit for 10 hours a day, and Ron and his team go through just concept review after concept review after concept review. It really is different from what I do here. And actually, I've always maintained if 4N had been doing what I do here, I never would have started doing it. Yeah, it's the fire hose issue, Shelley, right? It works well for some people. This works well if your problem is technical knowledge, but not good for technique. They do a day on exam technique and not necessarily good for stress, Shelley. That's the problem there. Okay. That being said, I have definitely had students who came to my classes, did not pass the exam, and then went to do the 4N class and then passed the exam. Okay. So it does work for some people. It's not for everybody. Ron has good results. It does pay off, but it's, like I said, it has some limitations. Okay. Yeah, that's good, Melissa. I like that. If you found a way to make that tool really work for you, that's good. I think that that's the same comment. Who said before? A couple of people said before that they have enjoyed the exam success material. And that's a very similar type of package. It's a review package with some practice questions, sort of bullet points of different concepts. I don't have a useful way to compare the exam success material to the 4N material. Maybe if you're, yeah, like I said, let's say if 10 years ago, if I'd felt like Ron was doing more of this, I would have never started doing this. I would have just kept sending people to Ron. But I really, when I wrote the exam, I thought, I think people really need just to learn how to write an exam. And especially people in this business where a lot of us are 5, 10, 15, 20 years out of school. And if, like me, you did a Bachelor of Arts, you probably never wrote a real exam in your life. Okay, if I hadn't done some stats and science classes in university, I never would have written a real exam. But certainly no engineering exams or anything like that for this guy. So the exam success stuff, yeah, it's good, Sharon. I appreciate that. Is a review. It's got review material, and there's also practice questions here. I've seen some of their stuff. I like it. Some of the critiques I've heard are a little too much errors in it, and maybe not sort of financial planning oriented enough. But I have heard a lot of people, I had 2 people on this call today for sure, at least 2 have specifically commented that they found the exam success material good. And that's useful. You can, I don't know if those people want to speak up again. And then if people have questions about it, you can float those questions. They have, it's a weird thing. Well, it's not weird. It's a very normal thing today, Melissa. They sell it in like tiered packages. So you can pay like $300 and then you have all these add-ons. And if you buy them separately, they're $50 each. But if you add them on, they're $5, $10, $15. It's one of those kind of deals. So you go and you can bundle it all together, or you can buy little chunks. But it makes that question very difficult to answer. Okay. I think if you buy their full package, it's around $450. I think that's what it is. They do a live class. I have no idea about that live class. I can't comment on it. I don't know. All right. And then has anybody actually seen the monkey credit stuff? I hadn't even heard of these guys until about 2 months ago. They did a marketing blast to one of the MGAs. I'm not sure who, but somebody forwarded it to me. I'm looking for somebody who's done this package. To me, it looks a little bit like an afterthought. but they do have a CFP prep package. I have no comment. I just don't know what it looks like. Okay. And then back to this morning. So this morning I showed you all the stuff on my website. And there is lots there. Okay. Whew, how's that? Okay. I hope so. It's just, you have so much time, Annie. I hate to see people spend money on something that's not useful. I think you want, before you buy anything, to really think about that. If you want to do other questions, Melissa, the other place where you can find some questions anyways is, there's a couple places you can tool around a little bit with this. You can go to the level 1 prep, and there's multiple choice here. There's 200 multiple choice questions, 190, whatever, in the level 1 prep. It's level 1, but it's probably questions you haven't seen before, so at least some multiple choice practice. I have no other case study questions, Melissa. All my case study questions are in the package you're already aware of. Now, I'm back into my website here, CFP exam, and I just want to show what we're going to do for the next couple of classes. So today, I'm not sure whether we're going to get to any more case today, but we did this one. We did the Stephen and Nancy case, okay? And what I figure is probably going to work out, this would be about right, is that we'll do right up to here on day 2. Okay. And then we'll do most of the second half on day 3. This will be our day 3 efforts. So we probably now, and just the size of the class, and it's good. I am happy for this. Lots of really good questions. I feel like good questions from you are better than canned content from me. We probably won't get to exam 2 at all in class here, and that's fine. I don't mind that. That gives you a month to get through, or sorry, a month and a half to get through it after we're done class. You can share with your peers, whatever it is. I'm not too fussy about any kind of copyright or whatever. I don't really care about that, honestly. Exam 2, like I said, we won't get to this in class much at all, except for one question. There's one question in here that I do specifically want to do, and that is the Karen and Gord question. We will do this on day 3. Okay, so if you're thinking about preparing for day 2 and day 3 of class, think about exam 1 and then the Karen and Gord question from exam 2. Okay, is that reasonable? And just while we're here, for those that didn't pick it up this morning, this is also where your recordings and so forth are. Okay, so just in the same place as everything else, just the CFP exam prep. So you would be in the dashboard, which you've gotten to from BCC Education. Okay, so you logged in, and then you clicked in the top right here on whatever it is, check my learning materials. I can remember what the language is, but anyways, you pop in here. You'll go to, should be on your first page, but for me, it's too many courses. You'll go to CFP exam prep. And from CFP exam prep, you will just scroll down to where it cleverly says webinar recordings. And by sometime tomorrow morning, should be this evening, but might be not till tomorrow morning, you will see right here the notes from today, the blank slides from today are already here, and the screenshots from today. I don't know if I mentioned this this morning. I think I failed to mention this. The recordings don't capture the chat transcripts. Oh, I did mention it this morning. So when you watch any recording, you want to make sure that you also copy the chat transcript over and match that up with the recording. And that way you can follow along with the questions people are asking. You'll have to print that off, but it's normally only a couple pages. Okay, that's good. Yeah, I showed that as well this morning, Alan, but chapter 5 has a whole bunch. So I would suggest if you missed that first hour this morning, go back and catch that. But I showed a whole bunch of financial calculator stuff in that first hour this morning, Alan. Okay. All right. I don't want to dismiss your question, but I also don't want to double up on time. Okay. Were you on for that first hour, Alan? And I'm not being critical if you weren't. I get that people have lives, right? Okay, thanks. Yeah. It breaks my heart, but I'm not always the most important thing in everybody else's lives, right? Yeah, if you're looking for the cheat sheet version of it, actually in past classes, I've done a more thorough version of that. I just found that it's not a great use of time. You really end up spending about 15 or 20 minutes extra for not a lot of return. But yeah, if you went to day one of an earlier class, you would find another version of that camera. Yeah. Okay. And of course, then share, right? So you get whatever you think is mostly complete, you share that with somebody, and you'll see that they'll have things on there that you didn't think about. Okay. Okay. Perfect. What are we going to do? Let's do a little bit of concept review. We haven't done any real concept review yet today. And sorry, Joan, if this is going to be lame for you, but most of my concept review, unfortunately, is going to focus on tax, just because I think it's where most people need the most help. It's certainly where I find people get the most confidence from, let's say. Okay. Here is my scenario then. I have Kevin here, and Kevin is the 100% owner of a small business, owns all the shares, and the shares have an ACB of 0. Okay, and OPCO is currently sitting on something like $600,000 of active assets, and that's sort of Kevin's history. He's always run his business. He's built up now some active assets, and for the first time ever, he has some cash to invest. He has $50,000 of cash, and he comes to you, his financial planner, and he says, I would like to look at investing that $50,000. And you go through this with Kevin, and you could take the money out, but you'd have to pay tax on it. He's already maybe taking a little bit of income out of his corporation. And so that $50,000 would turn into just $30,000 personally, because that's not really that exciting to me. I'd rather not do that. Or he can leave the money in OpCo, and you ask him if he's going to use it for any sort of expansion or acquisition or equipment purchase in the near future. He says, no, none of those things appeal to me. My business is kind of where I'd like it to be. And I really just see it now generating good surplus cash every year that I can now reinvest back, or sorry, that I can now use to build maybe some future savings for myself. You say, well, Kevin, that's a great idea. And I certainly encourage investment within the corporation. And that could be true. The challenge here is that, Kevin, as you start to build your passive assets up, that's what this cash would be, although you can have some cash and have it considered as active, but really this is surplus to the business. Kevin says, yeah, that I can see myself doing that regularly. You say, Kevin, you know that one day you're going to then get to a point where you can no longer use the lifetime capital gains exemption. And Kevin says, well, really, why do I care about the lifetime capital gains exemption? And the reason that Kevin might care about the lifetime capital gains exemption is because even if he's never going to sell his business, which may or may not be true, I don't want to get too focused on that, one day he is going to die. Now, you might be disappointed that we bring it up, but whatever. That's your job, not mine, to deal with. Okay, so we talk to Kevin here. We say, so however we do it, I don't really care where we invest the $50,000. That it could be insurance, it could be in mutual funds or ETFs or whatever. I don't really want to go down that path. That's not the point here, but that's a valid discussion to have, right? I'm not suggesting that you're wasting your time having that discussion. It's just not the discussion I want to have here. And honestly, it's probably not something you'll see too much of on the exam. That's fair? Okay, so one day he will die, and let's say when he dies then, OpCo has a value of, just for the sake of argument, $1 million. Okay, and at that time, that $1 million comprises the following. He still has his $600,000 of active assets, but he also has $400,000 of passive assets. Okay. At that point, would he be able to use the lifetime capital gains exemption? No, it's gone, right, Emmerich? We have too much passive assets, no lifetime capital gains exemption. And therefore, $1 million capital gain at death, resulting in a $500,000 taxable capital gain, resulting in about $250,000 of tax. Okay. Is that fair? So I point out to Kevin that if we do a little bit of a transaction right now in order to head this problem off, we can actually reduce this tax burden at death. Or I guess I could just not tell him, sell him $250,000 of life insurance and deal with it that way. I don't know. You tell me. What I'm going to do then, I'm going to take the shares that Kevin owns right now of OpCo. Now, there are many, many ways that I could do this. This is not the only method. I'm just going to show a nice, easy method, I think relatively easy to understand. I'm going to take the shares of OpCo, and I'm going to use Section 85 of the Income Tax Act to roll these into a new corporation, which we'll call New Holdco. New Holdco will now own all of Kevin's shares of OpCo. And in exchange for that, Kevin is going to take back shares of New Holdco. Okay. And Kevin now will take back 100% of the shares of New Holdco. New Holdco now owns 100% of OpCo. Now, we really haven't accomplished anything here, although you could argue that there's a little bit of a business benefit because OpCo keeps all the active assets now. And one of the business benefits we have is that I can use New Holdco to sit on passive assets. I can move that $50,000 up this ladder. And we can invest in New Holdco. And now if OpCo gets sued, it's harder to lose that $50,000. Yeah, so that when I said, Shelley, that there are many ways you can do this, what you did is what would, I'm assuming, was probably what's sometimes called a dirty 85, Shelley, or sometimes an internal 85. Okay, yeah, that's it. It did depend what you're trying to accomplish. I'm going with the simpler structure here. Okay, that internal 85 or dirty 85 is actually a pretty complicated transaction. Okay, good. But your accountant did save you probably whatever it is, $500 or $600 a year for the rest of your life by doing that. Okay. Okay. When Kevin moves his shares of OpCo into New Holdco, there is a rollover available, but he may not use the rollover. He's actually going to make a decision. Although really, he's going to do exactly what Shelley just said and just listen to his tax professional. The decision he makes here is called the elected transfer price, which means he chooses a price that this transaction happens at. And given that we're dealing here with a non-depreciable capital property, that price is going to be somewhere between a low end based on his ACB. The minimum price then would be 0, which is his ACB. And the maximum price will be $650,000, which is his fair market value. Is everybody with me there? Now, if I choose the zero price, we get a true rollover. And Shelley, this exact thing happened with your 85 as well. Okay. Well, I'm trying to move it out of that, Malcolm. Good. I'm hoping not. I'm hoping in about 3 minutes it's not. That's good. If it still is, then I've wasted all of our time, right? Okay, so I would have a true rollover here, and that means that his ACB would still be 0, and really no change to his tax position. Is that what I'm trying to do here? No, we don't want to use that rollover. We want to get away from the rollover. Instead, we're going to elect the higher transfer price. We're going to elect a $650,000 transfer price, which is going to create a $650,000 capital gain. Why do I not mind creating that capital gain? Because he's going to use his lifetime capital gains exemption. What's the active asset cutoff for the lifetime capital gains exemption? It has to be at least 90% active, and it's about an $860,000 exemption today. Okay. If you said 850 or 880, no problem. You would be perfectly well suited for any exam question with those numbers. If you know it's in that sort of mid to high 800s, you're absolutely fine. Okay. So as long as he has at least 90% active assets at the time of disposition and has had 50% active assets for the prior 24 months, then the lifetime capital gains exemption is available. That's the problem there, Brian. If your active assets aren't enough, then the lifetime capital gains exemption is not available. Okay, so he wants to create that capital gain and then subsequently use $650,000 of his lifetime capital gains exemption to offset that. Okay, that's all good. And that's where, Shelley, I said, remember, Kevin came to you with that $50,000, and you, being Kevin's switched on financial planner, said, maybe before we buy you a big permanent insurance policy and start paying big premiums into that thing, maybe we should talk to your accountant and see if we can crystallize your lifetime capital gains exemption. That's good? And that's it, Martin. Now, that being said, if he came to you, let's say just for the sake of argument, Martin, he had $80,000 of passive assets. You got $80,000 of cash. You with me there? You would just take a little bit of dividend out. You with me there? Yeah. No, so let me come back to that, Sharon. I've kind of answered that question already, but I want to answer that. I'll come back to that in a second, okay? When Kevin does this transaction, the lifetime capital, I can't remember the exact amount, $866,000 of LCGE for, let's say here, this is maybe a more interesting way to see it. Let's say in 2022, he has another opportunity to use his lifetime capital gains exemption. You with me here? Right, that's it, Shelley. And for the sake of argument, the 2022 lifetime capital gains exemption is $910,000. That's what inflation has taken it to. And in 2019, he used 650,000 of that. That means he still has $360,000 available. Okay. Yeah, that 90%, sorry, 260. Okay. Okay. So many questions now. Just bear with me for 1 second. Right. So Tanner raises this point. I'm just going to repaste your question here, Tanner, just because you asked it just a minute ago. I know, but there's a couple of questions that followed. So Tanner asked this question about this works if you're winding up or selling to arm's length. In this scenario, oh, thanks, Joan. You could do that publicly, Joan. I just couldn't remember the exact amount. 866, 912. Thanks. I used to remember the stupid amount every year. And then this year I said, I made an active decision not to memorize it. I'm done with it. Anyways, yeah, remember, Tanner, my original premise here was that I talked to Kevin about what happens when he dies. That's right. You with me there? I really did this because I figured Kevin is going to die in the seat one day, and I've minimized his taxes on death. Okay. Realistically, the chances of, and I know this is so complicated now, but here we go. In real life, for business owners like Kevin, who run a business other than a farm, the number of times that you would be selling to an arm's length entity who buys the shares of your business. This would be such a rare event that it's really not a great planning consideration. The vast majority of business purchases that happen are asset sales, and the lifetime capital gains exemption is not available there anyways. Okay, that's good. I find there's often a sort of conceit that you'll be able to use lifetime capital gains exemption when you sell your business. Other than farming businesses, though, hardly any business will actually do a share sale. For those that have been around the business community, is that a fair thing to say? Does somebody have a huge number of share sales that they've actually been involved in? Okay. None. Joan says none. All right, that's interesting. But I would say the farming community is an exception to that. Farming is where you will see shares sold. And I'm not suggesting it never happens, Brian. The two common scenarios I would point to is if you're getting bought out by a publicly traded company, they'll buy your shares usually. And when you have a junior who is buying from a senior and the senior is financing the sale, they will often force a share sale. Is that fair, Brian? There you go, Terrence, right? Big publicly traded company. And Terrence, I'm assuming then when you sold your business, they did a lot of due diligence, and they have all kinds of restrictive covenants on you where if they find something later on, they're coming back to you to get their pound of flesh. Would that be fair? That's the reason I normally see, yeah, share sale done, because they want to make sure they get everything, right? That big multinational. Yeah, that's perfect. Okay. But in most business to business, that's the exception. Yeah. Okay. And like I said, those are, and I said publicly traded. I don't know if whoever bought you was publicly traded, but that scale of company, right? Okay. Yeah, perfect. All right, so now go, and I know, Sharon, I still have to answer your question about insurance. We'll get there. Okay. I've kind of answered it already though, Sharon, with my comments in red over here beside Nuco. Do you see where what you said isn't much different from what I have here concerning where that $50,000 goes? I said invest here. I could have said buy permanent insurance here, right? It doesn't really matter. Okay, I don't want to make a decision about where the money goes. Going back to Boston's point earlier, it's not really material to our discussion. Effectively, what we're going to do then is elect out of the rollover. We're actually going to trigger a $650,000 capital gain. So there would be deemed proceeds for Kevin based on a $650,000 elected transfer price. And now, once this transaction is done, what is Kevin's ACB? Big fat $650,000 ACB. If Kevin dies later on with $1 million company, now when Kevin dies, instead of $1 million capital gain, we're going to have a $350,000 capital gain, $175,000 of taxable capital gain, and by extension, we brought that tax bill down quite a bit. We're now looking at somewhere in the neighborhood of whatever it is, $82,000. Let's go 85,000 of tax. And now, Sharon, I could take some of that $50,000. I could buy a permanent insurance policy that would provide enough death benefit to cover off that approximate tax liability and go and invest the rest. Does that make sense? If I've done what I suggested was going to happen here, Tanner, if I've built up that amount of passive assets, then I've probably ruined the lifetime capital gains exemption. And that's a real thing that happens. I want Kevin to succeed. I want Kevin to invest in new holdco, but as he does that, he is gradually chipping away at his ability to use the lifetime capital gains exemption. No, we did use the lifetime capital gains exemption. Shelley, we used it. We absolutely used it right here. Right? We used the $650,000 of lifetime capital gains exemption. Right. It is deemed proceeds. If you follow this on the tax return, and I'm going to do this now, Shelley, you're going to regret asking that question, but that's my job. Okay. Any questions before I erase this. So dying, Brian, isn't necessarily going to trigger the ability to use lifetime capital gains exemption. Okay. He would have to have some other transaction, because now we're building passive assets in NewCo, right? No, I don't understand the question, Brian. Sorry. Yeah, this will be on the slide deck, Shelley. Absolutely. Okay. Yeah, there is a kind of way to do it, Amanda. Not to avoid capital gains. Okay. Not to avoid capital gains. Alan, there's no more thing called eligible capital property. Good. You can eliminate eligible capital property from your vocabulary. It's now, is it class 14? Is that what it is? I can't even remember. But yeah, there's no such thing as eligible capital property anymore. That's not a thing in the Income Tax Act. That's good, Alan. It makes your life better as an exam writer, but worse as somebody who might be one day selling eligible capital property, or what would have been eligible capital property. But in the short term, big win. Okay. Yeah, sorry, Brian, I'm missing something in your question. I apologize. And Amanda, you're right in that we want to do this planning earlier rather than later. Okay, if we wait to do this planning, then a lot of these opportunities are off the table. Sorry, go ahead, Brian.
I just, you mentioned there that when Kevin dies, would that be like in 2019, say, right after he did the rollover? Because on the other side here, you got the 2022 where he does another remainder of the of his lifetime capital gains exemption. Is that what you're assuming? That's before 22? I'm confused.
No, one day, like way down the road.
After 2022. Okay, so he wouldn't have a $350,000 capital gain then if he had more lifetime capital gains exemption to use up.
Yeah, all I'm pointing out here is that, remember that I put that right in there at the beginning, Brian, right? That was really the first conversation I had with Kevin, where I said, Kevin, one day, way down the road, don't worry, I'm not talking about tomorrow, you're going to die. Okay? And let's say that this is your scenario when you die. Okay. This is an extension of where he starts off. He brought us this $50,000 and says, Brian, I want to invest this with you. What can you do for me? And you say, hey, super exciting opportunity, Kevin, but let's talk to your accountant before we get crazy with investing those dollars. And this is one of the reasons you would talk to the accountant, because you would say, look, if we don't do any tax planning when you die, there's going to be a $250,000 tax bill for your estate. But if we just do a reasonable amount of tax planning, we're going to knock that tax bill for your estate down to $85,000.
Okay. the 2022 threw me off. That's all.
That was a specific question somebody had asked, is can you use the lifetime capital gains exemption a second time? That has nothing to do with Kevin's death or this company. Kevin also owns a farm, and that's where he's going to use lifetime capital gains exemption.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. Annie, I can't answer that question. I don't know any. Post that question publicly or post it on the forums, and somebody will answer that question for you. Okay. No, you can use, sorry, Dean. Lifetime capital gains exemption is absolutely available here. Yeah. And you're right, Tanner, if it was the farm, then there'd be $1 million of exemption available. That's absolutely true. Yeah. So I could have bumped that amount up to whatever it is. Instead of 260, I could have done whatever is available there. Okay. But you're right, Tanner. There'd be $1 million exemption if we're talking about a farm disposition. Yeah, Dean, I think what you're saying is incorrect. You can use the lifetime capital gains exemption. Well, it's a fair point, Shelley. All right. It's a lot of moving parts, isn't it? It's a lot of moving parts. Okay. Dean, are you okay there? Okay. Right. So, Nicola, in fact, the question that you might have here is exactly where I started. You would have this little scenario dealing with Kevin, and Kevin comes to you with this. There's just no win with it, though, Amanda. No matter what, that end of the day is the end of the day, right? There's no fun stuff. There's no time when we play games or whatever. It's just how it goes. Now, that being said, we're not done with this, Amanda. We're not done with the lifetime capital gains exemption. We will see it again in some questions that are coming up. Yeah, I just don't have a lot of easy stuff, Shelley. Now, Nickel, and honestly, I still think that the bigger focus I have is still on exam technique. That goes back to my comments earlier, right? There is a reason I leave this stuff till the end of the day. Okay, now back to the scenario. Yeah, it's just this scenario. Kevin comes to you, Nicola, and one of the questions he asks you is, what do I do with this $50,000? And then you might just work through the scenario. Now, I had earlier mentioned that you're going to make ample use of your scrap paper. Remember that? My comment about using so much scrap paper? You would be mad. I would not even try to do this without drawing it out, just like I have here on my scrap paper. I would have 3 or 4 pictures to go along with this. I would not try to answer the question without having drawn it all out. I would have a little picture for the opco to holdco transition. I would have a little picture for elected transfer price. I might have a little picture for, or a little chart of his taxes at death. Oh, sorry, Alan, do you have a question? I'm going to throw you back on mute there. I hope you don't have a question. If you do, just bring yourself back on mute and ask. Okay. So that scenario, Nicola, quite reasonable to test you on, and that's the financial planner's question. That's where I don't have the accountant coming to me with a problem. You could have other questions here. You could have the question that Sharon suggested before, where we're asked about permanent insurance. Maybe we have a permanent insurance need within the corporation, and you're asked what entity is best to hold that permanent insurance. And that's where you might do this transaction in order to create a holdco to hold the permanent insurance. Okay. That's good. Why do we like the permanent insurance in holdco? What's the reason for that? Okay, it's still payout through CDA. Maybe leverage. That's possible, although that's a pretty tall order to get through now. But yeah, the biggest one is honestly going to be the creditor protection. It's exactly what I pointed to here. That is the biggest reason to have insurance in the holdco, is that if we buy permanent insurance here and Kevin dies while the corp is getting sued, same argument, it's harder, not impossible, harder to get the death benefit. Whereas if you have it paid to opco, much easier to get the death benefit. Okay, you could make an argument as well that if we later sell OpCo, then Kevin still owns his insurance policy through his holdco. Emrit, I need more to that question, sir. I'm not following. And that's, that if we get the scenario Terrence talked about earlier, selling your business, well, there you go. Are you asking me, Emrit, about how secure that death benefit is? Yeah, there's all kinds of stuff here. That's a pretty complicated question. That's really the lawyer's question. You'll notice that what I didn't say here is that it's definitely protected. You with me there? What I said was it's harder to get the death benefit. Okay. My lawyer, I like how my lawyer explains this. He equates this always with a chase scene in a movie. So when you do things like put in place a holdco or use contracts or even trusts or whatever, that these tools are like the chase scene in a movie where there's somebody doing the chasing and somebody being chased. And the person being chased tried the holdco. They tried the whatever insurance. They tried creditor protected assets. They tried a trust. Despite all of those things, the person doing the chasing might still catch them. That's fair. That's a relevant question, though, for exam purposes, Amrit. That's where if I said something like, it is guaranteed that a creditor could not touch that. You see how that's a problematic exam answer? And yet I see that kind of language used quite a bit. Okay. Whew. Well, I think we will start off next time with a look at how this would actually look on the tax return, because there are a couple more points I'd like to raise, and I do recognize that we're pretty much out of gas now. That being said, did I leave any questions unanswered here? I feel like I probably did. Yeah, that's where we'll pick up, Sharon, with this set of notes and the tax return. Okay. That's easy. Yeah. Okay. Any questions before we wrap up? I showed again where to get the recordings. I think now everybody has a handle on that. Let's go back to the schedule here just so we can establish that. And yeah, we're on again then the 15th, which will be 2 weeks from yesterday, Tuesday, 2 weeks from now. We'll do the second half. How was that for optimistic scheduling? The second half of exam 1, if by half I mean 10/11ths of it. And then a couple other technical topics. I know I've got a to-do list for you here, and that's something we'll work through, and we'll talk about multiple choice testing on this exam. Okay, but I appreciate lots of good questions today, and I feel like we covered a lot of good ground, even though we only got through one actual question. We talked about exam technique a lot, and I hope people have a really good idea about what to do over the next couple of weeks in terms of study. Get on those forums, ask questions, that's fine. And yeah, I really hope, Alan, that we have a good handle on what's in front of you 2 months from now. So perfect, thanks. And I know some of you had lots of comments and some of you kind of sat back and listened, and I appreciate that there's those different learning styles. That's good. Okay, yeah, thanks so much, everybody. And yeah, thanks. I know, like I said at the lunch break, it is a big sacrifice of your time to be here. I do try to make the most of that. I feel like I don't want to waste anybody's time. I know you could all be out there making a living. So I hope that we've made good progress. Other than that, let's meet again in 2 weeks, less a day, and enjoy your studies until that.